It was a quiet evening in the small town of Ravenswood. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the autumn leaves. Jane Parker sat in her living room, enjoying a rare moment of peace with a cup of hot tea and a good book. The calm was suddenly shattered by a loud, insistent knocking at her front door. Jane glanced at the clock, 7:45 p.m. It was an unusual hour for visitors. Her heart skipped a beat as she stood up and made her way to the door. The knocking continued, steady and unrelenting. Peering through the peephole, she saw two children standing on her porch. Their heads were bowed, and they were dressed in oddly outdated clothes. Who could they be? Jane wondered, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. She unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The children looked up simultaneously, revealing pale faces and eyes as black as coal. Jane's breath caught in her throat. "Please, ma'am," the older of the two children said in a flat, emotionless voice. "May we come in? We need to use your phone." Jane's instinct was to help, but something about these children set her on edge. Their eyes, voids of darkness, seemed to bore into her soul. She felt an overwhelming sense of dread. "I'm sorry," Jane said, her voice trembling slightly. "I can't let you in, but I can call someone for you." The younger child, a girl, spoke next. "Please, ma'am, we're lost and our parents will be worried. Let us in." Jane felt a chill run down her spine. The children stepped closer, their expressions still unnervingly blank. Every instinct screamed at her to shut the door, to get away from these unnatural beings. I can't," she stammered. "I'm really sorry." The older boy's face contorted into a look of frustration. "Let us in, ma'am. We need to come in." Summoning all her strength, Jane shut the door and locked it, her heart pounding in her chest. She leaned against it, trying to catch her breath. The knocking resumed, louder this time, accompanied by the children's voices, now more insistent. "Let us in! Please, ma'am, let us in!" Jane backed away from the door, her mind racing. She fumbled for her phone and dialed 911. As she waited for the dispatcher to answer, the knocking suddenly stopped. Silence filled the air, heavy and oppressive. 911, what's your emergency?" came the calm voice of the dispatcher. "There are two children outside my door," Jane said, her voice shaking. "They have black eyes. They're demanding to be let in. I'm scared." The dispatcher asked for her address and assured her that help was on the way. Jane hung up and waited, every second feeling like an eternity. She peered through the peephole again, but the children were gone. The street outside was empty, bathed in the eerie glow of the streetlights. The police arrived within minutes. Two officers approached her door cautiously. Jane let them in, relieved to see their reassuring presence. "Ma'am, are you okay?" Officer Collins asked, his expression serious. Jane nodded, still shaken. "They were just here. Two children with black eyes. They were not normal." The officers exchanged glances. "We've had reports of similar incidents," Officer Collins said, "but we've never found any evidence. Can you tell us exactly what happened?" Jane recounted the encounter in detail, describing the children's appearance and their unnerving behavior. The officers listened intently, taking notes. "Did they try to force their way in?" Officer Ramirez asked. Jane shook her head. "No, but they were very insistent. I felt like if I let them in, something terrible would happen." The officers nodded. "You did the right thing by not letting them in," Collins said. "We've heard stories about these black-eyed children. Some say they're spirits or entities. Others think they might be something else entirely. But one thing is clear, they seem to need permission to enter." Jane shuddered at the thought. "What do they want?" "We're not sure," Ramirez admitted, "but we'll patrol the area and keep an eye out. In the meantime, make sure your doors and windows are locked, and if they come back, don't let them in." In the days that followed, Jane couldn't shake the encounter from her mind. She decided to research the phenomenon, hoping to find answers. She scoured the internet, reading countless accounts of black-eyed children's sightings. The stories were eerily similar. Children appearing out of nowhere, asking to be let in and exuding an aura of malevolence. One story caught her attention. It was an old legend from the 1800s about a group of children who had died in a tragic fire. According to the tale, their spirits roamed the earth seeking revenge on the living. Over time, their eyes had turned black as coal, symbolizing their lost souls. Jane also found modern accounts linking the black-eyed children to UFO sightings and other paranormal activities. Some theorized that they were aliens or interdimensional beings, using human forms to blend in and carry out their unknown agendas. Despite the varied explanations, one detail remained consistent. The children could not enter a home without being invited. This rule gave Jane a small sense of control, but the fear lingered. A week after the initial encounter, Jane began to feel a strange presence in her home. Objects would move on their own and she would hear faint whispers at night. She tried to dismiss it as her imagination, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger each day. One evening, as she prepared for bed, the knocking returned. Her heart raced as she approached the door. This time, she didn't open it. She knew better. "Let us in, ma'am," came the familiar, chilling voice. Jane remained silent, clutching her phone. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. "Please, ma'am, we're cold and hungry. Let us in." Ignoring the children's pleas, Jane dialed Officer Collins' number. He had given her his card after the last visit, assuring her she could call any time. The phone rang and rang, but there was no answer. "Let us in, Jane," the older boy's voice called out. "We know you're there." Her blood ran cold. How did they know her name? She backed away from the door, her fear turning to anger. She wouldn't let them in. She couldn't. Suddenly, the knocking stopped. The silence was deafening. Jane waited, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Minutes passed, feeling like hours before she dared to look through the peephole. The children were gone. Determined to end this nightmare, Jane decided to confront the entities once and for all. She gathered supplies, salt, holy water, and a cross. She wasn't particularly religious, but she was willing to try anything to protect herself. That night, she prepared a circle of salt around her front door and sprinkled holy water on the steps. She placed the cross near the door and waited. As the clock struck midnight, the knocking began again. "Let us in, Jane." The boy's voice was colder, more menacing. "We need to come in." Jane stood her ground. "No, you can't come in." The door rattled as if something was trying to force it open. The whispers grew louder, more desperate. Jane held up the cross and recited a prayer, her voice shaking but resolute. "Leave this place. You are not welcome here." A piercing scream echoed through the night, and the knocking ceased. The air grew still and the oppressive presence lifted. Jane felt a sense of relief wash over her, but she remained vigilant, knowing the battle might not be over. The next morning, she found footprints in the salt, leading away from her door. She contacted Officer Collins again, who assured her they would continue to investigate. He praised her bravery and reminded her to stay cautious. Months passed without further incidents, and life slowly returned to normal. Jane never forgot the encounter, but she found solace in knowing she had faced her fears and protected her home. She continued to research the black-eyed children, sharing her story and warning others to trust their instincts. The legend of the black-eyed children remained a mystery, but Jane had learned an important lesson. Some doors should never be opened, no matter how desperate the plea. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to click the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Until next time, stay cautious and remain vigilant.